to Hungry for More, an Epicurean's Dilemma. I'm your host, Trish Close, and I'm coming at you from my kitchen. On today's episode, it is a blast from my past, my dear childhood friend from Aiken, South Carolina, Suzanne Cupps. Suzanne and I became friends in middle school, fast friends, and she filled me in on what she's been up to the last few decades. For the girl who says she really didn't like to cook growing up, really didn't even care about food, she's now an incredibly talented chef in New York City. So, of course, we talk about culinary school, where really all of that started, the restaurants she's worked in, how she's moved up through the ranks at some of those restaurants, and why sourcing local and vegetables are incredibly important to her and really her passion. Things have shifted a bit for her. She recently left her latest restaurant because she's embarking on a new journey, which I'm super excited to share with you. I have to dedicate this episode to all of our friends, all of our peeps from Aiken, South Carolina, and all of the successes that they've had in the last several years. Here's Suzanne Cupps. Well, this is a blast from the past. Suzanne Cupps, thanks for being here. Thanks for joining me today.
Glad to be here. It's so fun to see a familiar face. Well, not so familiar anymore. But.
I know. So Suzanne Cupps, I know you as Suzanne Padiso. We actually met, I think sixth grade.
Mm-hmm. That's when I moved to South Carolina.
Kennedy Middle School. And I think it was my middle school really scared me. And so you and I became pals in middle school. And sadly, we sort of separated in high school, and then I moved away. But I'm really glad a couple of our mutual friends told me to reach out to you for this podcast because you're a foodie, you're a chef in New York.
Yeah, I know. I looked up your picture. And I was like, wait, that's not Trisha. Trisha.
Yeah,
and just like, I remember you as this young, blonde-headed,
obnoxious.
We were all young at that point. But so many memories. I feel like, it's hard sometimes to remember all the details of growing up. But when I heard your name and looked you up, I was like, oh my gosh, so many of my young memories, were with you. So
yeah, we were. I was telling a friend of mine, we were besties in middle school, you and me. I remember doing projects together. I remember going over to your house. I vividly remember your mom. Vividly. And in fact, on your Instagram, I think there's a picture of her somewhere, and I was just blown away. Like it's wild, right? All of these memories just come flooding back.
Yeah. I told my mom yesterday, I was talking to her that we were going to, have a conversation today. Mm-hmm. And I was like, someone I haven't seen in, I don't know, like 25 years. And so it was fun. And she immediately remembered who you were.
Oh, so. Funny. Yeah. I think that's the obnoxious side of me. People tend to not forget about that. But it also, sorry, go ahead.
No, middle school, everybody's a little obnoxious, I believe.
Yeah, big time. And we were in Kennedy on stage together. Do you remember Kennedy on stage? And cheerleading. That's right. I forgot about cheerleading. Yes, everyone. We were cheerleaders. Get over it. No, that's awesome. And I wrote down, here our connection. And I just love that, it doesn't matter how long it's been. You still have those fond memories, right? Especially of your friends. In fact, I follow a lot of the old Aiken peeps on social media. And so I wanted to give all of them a shout out right now. So I hope they're going to listen to this, or I hope they are listening. But all of those women that we were either friends with or were still connected to, or just anyway, they're all so successful in their own way. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I am opposite. I'm terrible at not only keeping in touch, but following. I'm like one of the last to join the social media trend, and also have a hard time just even keeping up with what's going on in my little world, much less, outside of it. But I think that one thing that's interesting is even if you don't remain friends or you don't keep in touch over the years, like those people, all my friends from Aiken, they shape my life so much. And that's why I am who I am. I've I've definitely taken a journey that was unpredicted, especially back then. But you know, you and all of our friends have you know, taught me all those foundational things that I needed to get where I am. So
Sure. Well, that's a really sweet of you to say. But yeah, definite a huge shout out to all of our old pals at South Aiken High School and Aiken High School for me. Yeah, I have so many fond memories of Aiken, South Carolina, for sure. And you probably aren't very connected on social media because, girl, you've been busy. I did a little bit of research. Holy cow. Let's start, though, from the beginning. I mean, I know you lived in South Carolina, but where are you from originally?
so I grew up in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and my family, we were the only ones there, so we didn't have a ton of family around us, but um, grew up there till I was 11. And then when I was 11, my dad was transferred to a job in South Carolina. So that's how we ended up in Aiken. And my parents are actually still there, and my sister and her family as well. So I definitely try to get back every once in a while.
Awesome. And if I remember, you have an older sister and an older brother?
Yes, older sister, and my brother is out in Denver with his family.
Wow. Okay. And I also remember, I feel like they were, I don't want to say significantly older, but you're the baby, but they were
I'm the baby. My
pretty,
sister's 10 years older. My brother's 7 years older.
that's what
Yeah.
I thought. Yeah.
They still treat me like the baby.
Well, because you are the baby. The babies of the family rule. I'm the baby too. But yeah, I do remember. And where's your dad from
My
originally?
dad's Filipino.
That's right. That's right. And so my question, I guess, when growing up, did he bring a lot of that culture into your family at a young age?
Yeah, he did. A lot of ways you know, didn't understand. I think as you get older, you kind of see more of what makes up your parents. But definitely from a food perspective, my dad was not one, especially when I was growing up. He was not one for sandwiches or anything like that. He had to have rice every single night for dinner. And my mom was the cook, so my mom, even though she's not Filipino, adopted a lot of those recipes. And pretty much we had rice every night for dinner, stir fries. There wasn't a lot. I think it's you know, it's changed and grown since I was young there, but there wasn't always access to a lot of the ingredients that traditionally you would find in Filipino cooking. But there was enough that you know, my mom could make dishes that felt Filipino to my dad. And I hated the food. I was you know, I was an American kid who, you know, didn't enjoy eating rice every night for dinner. So I would, you know, try everything from like putting ketchup or Thousand Island or something on it to try to make it more interesting to me. But,
Oh,
yeah.
you said finding traditional ingredients in Aiken, South Carolina was tough. Shocker. What a shocker.
It's a little better now.
Yeah.
There's definitely some changes that have happened.
Well, that's good. That's amazing. So did your mom, I mean, you said she adopted some of these, I guess recipes and dishes. Did she teach herself? Did she reach out to learn those things?
You know, that's an interesting question. I don't even know how it came about. Well, one of the things was how she met my dad. They lived in Washington, D.C. when they met, and my mom had a Filipino roommate. So, back then, especially, like no one went out, or very, very few times went out to eat. So you cooked at home. And so I'm sure she had picked up some of those like cooking techniques from her roommate. But my mom even said at their wedding, my mom and dad's wedding, they my mom and her sisters cooked all the food for the wedding, and they cooked all Filipino food. So all these women who are from central Pennsylvania don't know anything about Filipino food. They cooked Filipino food for the wedding. So I think it was just something that she knew was important to my dad, and kind of learned quickly.
I love that. Do you have a memory of something that she used to make, maybe a Filipino dish that you did love? I know you said rice you struggled with.
Yeah, no, definitely. There was the special kind of dish that not only special occasions, but it was a little bit more time consuming. So it wasn't like a, Tuesday night dinner kind of thing. Was
Sure.
pancit, which is the rice noodle dish. It's kind of very much like a fried rice or, now like a pad thai that's so popular. Very similar in types, but had lots of chopped vegetables, and that was always my favorite. That and leche flan, which is, look very similar to like the Spanish
Yeah.
type of flan dish. Those were probably my favorites growing up. And one of the funny things, maybe we'll get to it later, but when I did start cooking in college, one of my first big meals that I ever cooked was the pancit, the rice noodle dish, and I'm not kidding you. And you can ask my roommates then. It was about a 4-hour process for me trying to make this one dish to
Dang.
chop up everything. And probably now that I'm a chef, I could probably make it in like 20 minutes or so.
Of course.
It's not that hard.
Yeah, of course, of course. And so you graduated high school in Aiken, right? South Aiken.
Yes.
And then where'd you go to school?
I went to Clemson.
Oh, you did go to Clemson. Okay. Yay, go Tigers.
Yeah.
What did you study? What were you thinking you wanted to be?
So one of the things growing up, like I did well in school, whether it was middle school, high school.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, being just beyond upset at my first B, my only B I think I had in
Yes.
one quarter in high school kind of thing.
I remember you being incredibly smart. One of the things I was very jealous of growing up, that and your hair. But
Yeah, a lot of hair
continue.
still, but, yeah, it was that I did well in classes, but there was nothing that I was like really, really interested in. I kind of, I don't know if I want to say enjoyed every subject, because that's definitely not true, but nothing really stood out to me. So, when it was time to go to college, I think my best subject was math, and I always just excelled in it. And I guess, yeah, if you said like, what did you like the most? I guess, things like algebra and kind of my mind worked that way. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. The only thing that I ever said that was important to me is I didn't want to have a desk job. I wanted to be up on my feet. I wanted to be, moving around, whatever that meant at that point. And because I was good at math, I said, well, why don't I try to become a math teacher? So I went to college with like an education major, math kind of focus, and, took it from there. And to be honest, like even through all my classes, I liked them fine, but I was definitely not engaged in most of the classes I was taking. And so I just kind of kept with the same major, even though I wasn't so sure about it.
Interesting. And then you moved to New York after school?
Yeah, I made it through all of my classes, and then this is when I think that I always just kind of went with the flow and, did things that I thought either my parents would like or what was expected of me, and didn't really challenge that thinking too much. Not that my parents, said you have to be a math teacher by any means, but, they saw that I excelled at it, and, I did well at Clemson, and I got to the last semester and all I had to do was student teach. And I just I was dreading it. I just I didn't want to go to the classes. I didn't want to get up at 6 a.m., go to the high school and teach. And I thought oh, this is a red flag. Like if I don't want to do this in my, even, before it's a real job and I'm just student teaching, how am I going to make it through this as a career? And I also felt strongly that as a teacher, you have to be really passionate, and especially in math, because, I don't know, 75% of kids hate math. And so how can you go into that career? That's not a real statistic. That's probably.
I hated math. So yeah, I believe it.
Exactly. But how do you start out on that career and not be really excited to kind of teach? And so that last semester at Clemson, I decided to switch my major and minor. And so I ended up switching it to math major and education minor, which meant I had to take all these 300 level math classes that had no numbers anymore. It was all theory. I didn't understand. It was definitely not the way my brain understood math. And so they were pretty terrible, but it was the only thing I could do to get around that student teaching and graduate. So I did an extra summer session and graduated as a math major.
I was going to ask, changing your major at the very, very end, a little stressful. Were your parents freaking out? Were you freaking out?
I don't think so. I mean, I think it was just, I was more dreading. I like to take classes in the summer, an extra few months.
Yeah.
Seemed like a better deal to me than like to go to the high school and, spend my last semester at Clemson, like immersed in this high school that I just wasn't interested in doing. So I don't remember there being too much stress at that moment. A couple months later was the one time when it got really stressful, but at that moment, I think it was just, I don't know, who else would have done that? Like most people would just have done it and graduated. I knew I wasn't going to be happy if I had spent my last time at school.
You were listening to your gut for sure. I just wrote that down because I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like that's been a theme for you through your career, has been listening to your gut and listening to kind of really your passion. So I guess why New York? Why move to New York? You change your major, you graduate, and then why New York City?
So when I was graduating, I still didn't know what I wanted to do. I still didn't have an idea of what kind of job. And I think everybody that I knew was either moving to Charleston, South Carolina, or to Greenville, South Carolina, both small cities that I loved. But I just felt like I didn't want to do the same thing everybody did.
Sure.
I did it. I kind of was like that a lot in, especially more like high school, where I wanted to be in the group of friends with everybody, but I didn't really want to always be in the group, if that made sense. Like I wanted to be part of it, but I wanted to be able to do my own thing or kind of be on the outside a little bit. And I felt that same way leaving Clemson, is that I didn't want to just get dragged along and do what everybody else was doing. And because I didn't have a place that I wanted to go and I didn't have a career that I had chosen yet, didn't know what I was really good at, I thought, okay, let me look and let me see. So I interviewed for this like inside sales position in Greenville, South Carolina. And I said like, okay, this is a good job. If I get it, then, I could stay. I'll stay.
Yeah.
Thankfully I did not, because it turns out I'm the worst salesperson in the world. Like, I may ask like, would you like to buy this? No? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
That's about as pushy as I get in terms of sales. And so I looked, my parents were in Atlanta at the time, and I looked in Atlanta. I couldn't find anything that I wanted to do. And my brother was living in Philly at the time with his family, and I had been up, and he took me into New York City for a weekend kind of thing. And once I got something in my head, like that little seed, I just had a hard time dismissing it. And it was the year after 9/11. So everybody was very scared of New York. It was like, exactly a year.
Yeah.
Everybody's very scared of New York. I had never lived on my own. I mean, Clemson is very sheltered and close to home. So never really like gone out, never expressed any interest in moving to New York City. Didn't have a job, didn't have any money, didn't have a plan.
Sounds perfect.
Barely knew anybody. And I just couldn't get out of my head. And I just thought like, if I don't leave South Carolina right now, and again, I'm saying this not because it's a bad place to be, just because I knew myself, if I got comfortable and didn't get to, push myself somewhere else, I probably would never leave. And it felt important to me at the time to kind of step out and try to do something different. And again, I was not adventurous. It was not something that had ever been on anybody's radar. I'd never said it out loud or even to myself, like, hey, I want to move to a big city far away. And it just kind of popped in my head and wouldn't go away.
Yeah.
And so I ended up, it was not the decision that my family was in support of, which I get it. It was, it felt dangerous to them and it's expensive. And so I moved up here with my first month's rent and said, I'll find a job when I get here. And
Whew, that's scary. That's scary.
yeah.
I don't know very many people who could do that. And I do agree with you. I was forced to move out of South Carolina, moving to Vegas at 16, which was, talk about a culture shock. But I agree with you. I think if that didn't happen, I probably would still be living in South Carolina because I'm the same way. I get comfy and cozy, and that whole spreading my wings, I think, would have happened, but I don't know if I would have moved very far away from South Carolina. So I think, I don't know. I understand what you're saying there, but how scary, how scary to move to a city, and not just any city. This is New York City, and not knowing what you're going to do. You don't have a job. Did you have a place to live? I mean, that's just frightening to me.
There was an acquaintance from college who definitely, we weren't friends, but we knew each other through someone, and she found the apartment. It was a 6th floor walk up, in the middle of Manhattan. And so I moved in. Yeah.
What was your first job in the city?
So I had planned, I told my family, I'll just get a job waiting tables, and, people, I'll make lots of tips. I went probably 3 or 4 places, and no one would hire me because I was looking at these big steakhouses. The guys that worked at these steakhouses, have 20 years of experience minimum. So no one even looked at my resume. And so I just opened, at that time, what you did, open the paper. So I opened the New York Times, and there was an advertisement for, $40,000 starting off, college grads. So I went to the interview, and it was a sales position. And it was this, they hired me on the spot. It was this big room, where just all these college grads, smart people, were just cold calling to put these advertisements in sports publications, and it was terrible. I mean, it was a horrible job. All you did was get hung up on all day and try to make these pitches, and it was very, it wasn't even that it was tough work. It was just terrible work. Yeah. And I'm not kidding you. People would go on their lunch break and just not come back. That's what happened.
Yeah. I believe it.
But it allowed me to, get my foot in the door and have enough money to, live and eat bologna sandwiches every day for a long time. But it allowed me the opportunity to stay in New York and kind of get myself settled here. So I did it for about 7 months. And then one weekend, my sister was here, and I was like, I can't go back. And she was like, don't quit because of me. I was like, no, I can't do it. Yeah. And I ended up getting a job next at the Waldorf Astoria, which is a really fancy, great hotel here. And got placed through a temp agency there, and the human resources department, and just loved it. And loved the boss. The whole team was amazing, and never really saw myself necessarily in HR, but just really, really enjoyed the whole atmosphere. And so I ended up working there for 2 years, and that's my first hospitality job. That's how I started in hospitality here.
Did you find that you were becoming interested in the things that were coming out of the kitchen, or were you really just focused on kind of that position you had?
It was very separate. It's a huge hotel. They're under construction now, but at that time, there were 1,600 rooms and 1,400 employees around there. So it was very separate. So I didn't see anything in the kitchen at all. Didn't know anything about. I mean, I knew about the positions. I did a lot of paperwork, but that was being in HR really just taught me about hospitality and how big of an industry it is here. And I just couldn't even believe that I had never really thought of that as a career, and didn't even know that was really an option in the hospitality world. And it's so funny because, living and growing up in South Carolina, hospitality is just the base level. You go to someone's house, they feed you a ton. You can't ever be somewhere without someone taking care of you, or that's just kind of the mindset of a lot of places in the South, and especially where we grew up. And it was just, I think that was like kind of the first eye-opening thing of like, oh, I want to be in hospitality. And I thought they had needed some help in the steakhouse, in their steakhouse at the Waldorf. And so a couple nights when I wasn't working in HR, I helped out in the steakhouse. And I thought, oh, well, what if I become like a front of house manager in hotels? I thought that was really interesting. And so that was kind of my plan until it got derailed by culinary school. But I was thinking about becoming more of a front of house manager.
Yeah. Well, tell me about that connection then, because you're doing this, it seems like you're kind of finally finding something that you really enjoy. And my dog Samson's going to come say hi. So where did you make that connection then to food? Like this is Samson.
Hi, Samson.
Yeah. Hi, buddy. Hi.
Sweet.
Yeah. So where did you make that connection then? When was it where you were like, the light bulb went off? Did you have the light bulb moment? Like, holy crap, this is what I want to do.
So I think that if you talk about like, why did I move to New York? And it was such an abrupt decision, and definitely none of my friends, none of my family saw that coming. I think if you ask the same friends and family about me and food and cooking, they would have no response, because I was never interested in food.
Yeah, I actually read that in an article that even growing up, you didn't like to cook. Like that was just not your thing.
I hated to cook.
Yeah.
My mom cooked every night. She would try to get me to help out. Sometimes it was like my chore. I would have to help, and I would do anything to try to, get out of the kitchen work.
Yeah.
I also wasn't really big on eating. I had my favorite kind of meals, but I wasn't adventurous. I just wasn't interested in food. When I was in college, about my junior year, I was still in the dorm, and that's when like George Foreman grills were popular. And so that's like some of the first things I cooked was like, chicken breast on the George Foreman grill, and like Bisquick and box brownies. And that's how I like learned to like cooking, I should say. And so like my senior year, I would cook things for my roommates, and hot dogs.
Yeah.
I don't even know. Like we would make mostly like brownies, whatever, things like that.
Right,
and
sure.
that's kind of how I got into cooking. And when I was at the Waldorf, I really liked so many aspects. I liked the hospitality. I liked the team I was working with. It went back to I was sitting at a desk and I was doing tons of paperwork. I mean, like so much paperwork that I could never like dig myself out of the hole. And I just was not happy with that. And I was dating someone at the time who was an actor, and he, kept saying, you need to do something more creative. You need to, and I was like, what is that? I'm not creative. And so he made me go through this like workbook, which was a lot of like free writing, which was, kind of like it would prompt you on some subject, and then you would write a list of 10 things you were thinking about, or 10 things you wanted to do, or,
Interesting.
And somehow cooking just kept coming up, which again, I was just doing very basic things at home. It was not something that I was like studying, or I wasn't really eating. I was in New York, but I like spending money on food wasn't important to me. I didn't have any friends in the food world, but somehow cooking just kept coming up. And so I ended up going to one of the culinary schools here in the city, Institute of Culinary Education, just for a tour. And I walked in and I was like, I've never seen a professional kitchen. Like, what is this? Like, I didn't know there was cooking school. I don't know. And again, it's that little thing that just got in my head, and I just couldn't get it out. And so as I was like looking for what's my next job after HR, I was thinking about going into, front of house management, and the cooking kept coming back, and, against all anybody else, any of the thoughts of my family and friends and everything, I just said, I'm going to go to cooking school. And, everything in New York is expensive, but schooling especially. And so the 6 months of the cooking program here was more expensive than my 4 years at Clemson. Like, it's
Oh my
crazy.
gosh.
Uh,
Wow.
and my family was like, "You don't like to cook? What are you talking about? Why do you want to go to cooking school?" And I just couldn't get it out of my head. And turns out that was a good thing. But
Yeah, no, it really was. So a 6-month program.
mhm.
You did, I think I read you did an externship at what restaurant?
My externship was at Gramercy
That's
Tavern,
right. That's
which I
right.
ended up going back to later. But I mean, it was all the first of things. Like, never held a professional knife. They give you all these tools
Mm-hmm.
to, well, you buy them, but you start with all these tools that I've never used before. I didn't know, the differences between what cilantro was, parsley, and I learned all of that. But it's definitely like a quick boot camp. I mean, 6 months
Yeah.
from for me, knowing nothing to trying to learn how to work in a restaurant was really quick. So really, when I started my learning was when I started to work in restaurants.
So I've interviewed quite a few chefs, and the majority of them have worked in restaurants before culinary school, or knew from a very early age that was exactly what they wanted to do, and it just was something that fit with them. And here you are, did not even like to cook, never really had those skills. Were you, I don't want to say intimidated, but were you surrounded by people like you that just were like, had never held a professional knife before, or were you surrounded by people who maybe had more experience than you, who had worked in kitchens?
Right. So a lot of the cooking schools won't even take you unless you've worked in a job in
Wow.
a kitchen.
Yeah.
So there was the bigger culinary school, which is upstate from New York City, Culinary Institute of America, which a lot of people I know went there. It's more of a 2-year program. You could do longer, but most people go for 2 years. I think they probably still require you to have worked in something in cooking before, but I didn't want to go there. I didn't want to move out of New York and live in a dorm again. I had done that before. So I opted to take a shorter program, which is a great program. But yes, I think I was probably one of the only people that walked into that kitchen that hadn't ever, set foot in a
Yeah.
restaurant before, or some kind of, not everybody was restaurants there. And I think a lot of people in my class were career changers. And I guess you could call me a career changer, though
Yeah.
I was so young, I didn't have a career yet. But a lot of people had shifted what they were doing, and so either that they were a little older in life and wanted to not have a hobby, but kind of change their day to day, or else they were had worked since a young age in kitchens and wanted a little bit of professional training. So yeah, I was definitely one of the only people, but it was a very I would say sheltered environment, especially people think restaurants are scary, and some are scary for people, but the cooking school was very generous with their instruction, and not assuming that you knew too much, and a little hand holding, and so it didn't feel like a scary environment to start off in.
That's perfect. That's perfect. And I also, just your kind of your resume in the restaurants that you've worked in, it really seems like, you sort of started at one level and then you worked your way up to this, and then you worked your way up again, and then you worked your way up again. Is that accurate?
Yeah, when I first started cooking, one of the things that I was drawn to was that repetition. Something that a lot of cooks get tired of is doing the same thing over and over until you get good at it. A lot of people just want to do it once and say, like, check the box, like, I'm ready for the next step. For me, I never had that confidence, and I've always been a perfectionist, so I never was happy with just doing something. Like, the idea that you continuously cut things into small square shapes until you're able to do it perfectly and have less waste and whatever that is, and then do it in a different shape, that was really enticing to me. And I think that when I was younger, math, meant a lot of formulas and a lot of, whether it's geometry or algebra. And that's how I thought about math. But I think what the part of math that I was the best at is actually logic. So a lot of those like puzzles, a lot of that like thinking of how do you do steps in a certain order, a lot of that is my math brain just kind of translated in a little different way. And a lot of people would have also guessed like, okay, you like math, then you should be, you'll probably need to be a pastry. There's a lot more, a lot
That's
more
what I
measuring numbers. I was never like that. I always hated to measure. I always hated, I just like that kind of repetition, that perfectionism, that the steps of how you do something was what I really gravitated towards.
Yeah.
So that in culinary school started, and then once I got even stepped into restaurants, that thing of doing it the same thing every day until you can do it perfectly, and then you can do it perfectly while you're doing something else. And then instead of, cooking the trout, then you can cook the piece of halibut, and then, like translating all that was really what got me. And it wasn't even the interesting part of it. It was never even the flavors or the tasting. That was something that was very hard for me, was to learn how to put the correct amount of salt or build flavor, because I was so focused on the technique behind cooking. I wasn't interested yet in the taste or, the flavors of food.
Interesting. Yeah, I had a piano teacher who once told me, when you play it the first time perfectly all the way through, then play it like that 5 to 10 times after.
Sure.
Yeah, just because you played it that one time perfectly doesn't mean you're going to play it the same way every time after. So when did you learn then that I knew that flavor was important, but when did that kick in for you? The tasting part.
So what you said about like working your way up to a point and then going for the next thing, that can kind of sum up my career. And when I started cooking, I really loved it. For a number of reasons, but I never really aspired to become a chef or to become a sous chef or to like, kind of work my way up. I just really liked the job of being a cook. So I did my externship at Gramercy Tavern, which is one of the biggest restaurants here in New York City, and still one of the most beloved. And I was there for 3 months, and, was in the basement peeling potatoes. And, I didn't know how to like stand in a kitchen, much less, the hustle and bustle and understand the speed that you have to work and all that. So it was a really great, 3 months of just kind of absorbing what was going on and trying to learn like, this much. And when my externship was done, I said, thank you. They said, thank you. And I went on my way, and I ended up, I didn't know where to go to work. And one of the girls in my culinary class was like, oh, there's an opening at Anissa restaurant. And I didn't know any restaurants, but I didn't know what Anissa was or who Anita Lowe, the chef owner, was. And I said, oh, cool. So I went there and didn't know anything about the restaurant. And she hired me on the spot, and I worked for 6 years for her.
Wow.
And she taught me how to cook. She taught me everything. And unfortunately, the restaurant's no longer open, but it was an amazing restaurant. And Anita traveled a ton, and she had she has a great palate. And so she was always bringing in new flavors and new ideas. And it was just an amazing place to kind of start my culinary journey. And at that time, again, I was still like very, very focused on how do I get better at specific techniques. So my knife skills got very good, like the knife cuts, like sauteing or grilling of meat and fish and everything. Like, it took me a little while, but I really excelled at kind of cooking in the kitchen. But where I was very weak was still like tasting and understanding, like how do I create dishes, or how do I you know, get those flavors right, or even how do I enjoy food? It still wasn't there. So that 6 years was really for me, learning about technique, and also working under a woman chef who apparently that wasn't a thing, but I didn't know it because she was my first chef. So
Yeah.
I know that women weren't chefs.
No, it's very rare.
Right.
Still, I mean, it's still really rare, actually. You
Yeah.
know, the industry is very male dominated, but I think that is incredibly awesome that one, you worked under a female chef, and two, you were there so long. And I have a feeling you probably learned the majority of your skills in that setting versus like cooking school. It was kind of like journalism school for me. They could teach us everything, but until you got that first job, I mean, that was my graduate school, was that first job, that first like year of working in a newsroom. So I have a feeling it was the same.
Yeah, I mean, for me, culinary school was so important because I would have never had the nerve to walk into a restaurant and say, "Can I have a job?" with no experience. So for me to be able to just have, a couple things that were taught to me, even if I didn't know really how to do them, and for the school counselor to be able to set up an interview with, at a restaurant, or set up an externship, was so important, because I would have never had, the guts to go and, and get in a restaurant
Yeah.
myself.
You were the executive chef at Untitled for a number of years, is what I read. Okay, so tell me about that.
So just to kind of backtrack a little bit, so you can understand the connection. After I was at Anissa for 6 years, I went back to Gramercy Tavern, who the kitchen was under a different chef, Mike Anthony. And really that's where, when I went to work for him, that's when I really got excited about sourcing and food and vegetable cooking. And that's also when I got interested in kind of moving up the ranks in the kitchen, because before that, I just really enjoyed cooking and being a line cook. And then when I went to Gramercy, I said, oh, like, maybe I want to be a sous chef. Like, maybe, maybe I do want to move up. And so I ended up a little over a year of cooking at Gramercy, became a sous chef, and was a sous chef there for about 3 years. And when it was kind of, I was talking to the chef, Mike, of like what my next steps would be. And, again, still didn't see myself becoming a chef. He kept encouraging me to continue on this path. And he had the opportunity to open another restaurant with the same company. So we work for Union Square Hospitality Group, which one of the largest hospitality groups here in the city.
Yeah.
They were reopening a restaurant called Untitled.
I wrote this down. It really seems like some of these restaurants you worked in, you were making a name for yourself, is what it seemed like to me.
Not for a while. I think, again, that wasn't necessarily my goal. My goal, like when I was at Gramercy, was to learn and to kind of be part of that restaurant. And the mentality there was team. So it wasn't like, a lot of places, a lot of chefs are kind of shown as being these like big ego, kind of folks. When I was at Gramercy, it was not that way. It was this is our dish. This is the food of Gramercy. And so, obviously we had a very talented chef, James Beard, award winner, but the mentality was always like it was a team effort. And so I think it was kind of ingrained in me that cooking is a sport, and you can't really get ahead unless you have a really strong team. So when I had been at Gramercy for almost 4 years, Mike Anthony, the chef, had an opportunity to open another restaurant. So he was still staying at Gramercy, but also opening another one within the company called Untitled. And the Whitney Museum used to be up on the Upper East Side, and they moved to this like very beautiful, very high profile architectural building by Renzo Piano in the meatpacking. So the Lower West Side of Manhattan, and they were moving the restaurant Untitled to that space, and it was just a totally different concept, different space. And so Mike signed on to become the chef of Untitled, and he said to me, like, why don't you come along with me, and why don't you be the chef de cuisine? And again, like, I just didn't have necessarily, it's not that I didn't have aspirations, I don't know, I didn't even know that was an option for me to kind of continue along. I was doing well as a sous chef. I enjoyed being a sous chef, but I loved Gramercy, and I wasn't thinking about what exactly that next step was. And so I ended up moving with him to Untitled, and we took a number of the folks that we had been working with at Gramercy to Untitled, and we opened this kind of huge restaurant. It was the museum opening was a big deal in New York, and it was crazy. There was nuts, people everywhere, and we were running not only Untitled on the ground floor, but also the museum's cafe on the 8th floor called Studio Cafe.
Wow!
So it was a very crazy and very intense experience trying to open 2 restaurants when the museum was opening too.
Yeah.
So we learned a lot about, like, what do people that are tourists that are at this museum, what are people that are New Yorkers that are coming to this museum want, what do our guests that we already knew that were fans of Gramercy that are coming here, what do they want? And it was some contradicting ideas of what we should be serving in the restaurant. So it was definitely a learning experience, but just built a really strong team and a great following there, and just loved it so much. And after about a couple of years of Mike being the chef, he decided to go back to Gramercy full time, and I was promoted to executive chef of the restaurant. So it was a big deal, and a big leap in my career, and to have a very large team kind of working with me was just an experience that I could have never imagined, and was so thankful to have.
Badass. That's awesome. That's awesome.
So,
good for you. That's incredible. And so how long did you work at Untitled?
I was there about 4 years.
Okay. And you were executive chef for how long there?
A little over 2.
Okay. So was there, and I guess let's talk then about 232 Bleecker, because there was this opportunity for you at this restaurant, but it never really, this was the restaurant that opened right before the pandemic?
Right. So I really loved what we had started at Untitled, and, like, the idea of kind of contemporary vegetable cooking, and I don't say vegetable cooking as in vegetarian. So I'm not a vegetarian chef. I love cooking vegetable dishes, but it's more about, like, the sourcing and the quality of ingredients that really kind of drives how I cook and what I like to make in the kitchen. And I felt like I had been in Untitled for 4 years, and it was kind of the next chapter for me to continue to move on, and found another group in the city here that was also very like-minded and how they think about vegetables and food, and it's a really amazing company that has all fast casual restaurants called the Dig Food Group. So they have a ton of restaurants here. And they were looking to open their first full service restaurant, and I got kind of hooked up with them, and just really enjoyed their chef and their CEO and our conversations about food and the space that they had chosen in the West Village on Bleecker Street was just incredible. And they had bought a wood burning grill, and they wanted to make vegetables the star of the restaurant, and just everything kind of felt aligned to me. And so we got to, do all the things that go into an opening, all the crazy long hours and all the stressful things of trying to get the gas turned on and trying to get your liquor license, and, all the things that behind the scenes, a lot of guests don't know goes into a restaurant. But even the fun things like, picking the plateware and making a menu and researching that menu and testing it again and again and picking a team and all that. It was amazing. And we really had a great setup and some really, really talented individuals and on a beautiful corner in the West Village. And so we opened December 16th of 2019, right before the holidays and everything. And it was just, it was great. It was, the energy was wonderful. The team was like really, really doing well. And, it is a long stretch when you do an opening and, whether you're just like learning how to do things and, get better at them, teaching your cooks, whether it's like troubleshooting all the things that you forgot about in the restaurant or you overlooked when you opened. And also like the process here in New York, especially like the review process of, having the critics come and trying to catch them in your restaurant and, make sure that they have a great meal and all those little things, because it does matter. We don't create restaurants for critics necessarily, but their voices are loud, and we want to make sure that we put our best foot forward so that more people can know about the restaurant and come see us. And so, we were doing all those things, and we were open exactly 3 months for when we had to shut down in March. It was.
That sounds heartbreaking. That sounds absolutely heartbreaking.
Well, I think it was hard to take it personally because there were so many businesses, around the world. There were so many places in New York that immediately had to shut down. And so it was hard to just, think it wasn't only happening to us. It was just all of our industry peers and friends, were, having their hearts broken. So not that that made it easier. It was a collective, kind of challenge for the whole industry here.
Yeah. Did you guys you ended up opening back up though, right?
Yeah. So we were closed for 3 months, and then we tried to do, all the things that people try to do to survive, trying to do meal kits and takeout. And we did a store for a while, like a little wine shop that we sold baked goods, and we did food to go. And, New York was kind of back and forth. We definitely, especially in that first part of the pandemic, we were the ones that took a lot of the brunt of what was going on.
Big time. Yeah.
And so, people were scared to go out, and the rules kept changing. Sometimes you couldn't do anything indoor, and then you could only do outdoor seating, and then it went to some indoor, some outdoor, and then it went back to outdoor. And it was just kind of a little all over the place, where you could build a structure outside, but the rules kept changing on what that looked like. So some of the things that I was really thankful for, one of them was, we obviously couldn't keep our whole team, but I was able to, continue to work with a lot of the folks that I've been working with for a number of years. And so even though it was a tough time, had some troopers by my side. So that was great. And then I never had done takeout ever in any restaurant I worked. Never really wanted to, but learn that. And I think that was a skill that was very important, and it was something new that I needed to learn. So learning how to do takeout. We did like a lot of meal kits. So how do you make your food? How do you package it? I remember one of the first kits we sent out, we had made this like cioppino, so like a seafood kind of bouillon-based type stew, and put the lids on, and they all exploded in the truck on the delivery. So like learning, okay, you have to buy the locking lids that don't, that you see in the grocery stores that you can't open and they won't explode. So learning how does our food translate, because a lot of what you do in a restaurant is you make food and you immediately serve it to the guest that's sitting right there. well, how do we create really delicious food and keep the integrity of what we're doing, but do it takeout or do it, in something that people have to reheat. And so that was a great learning experience. And I think that's something that will be valuable to my career in the future. Even if I don't ever want to do strictly takeout, it's still something that I was able to learn. So I also, had to go back to, I think in a restaurant, you always have to jump in wherever is needed. Yeah. So it doesn't matter what position you are, if you're the owner, if you're the chef, if you're the wine director, that's how it goes. Whatever's needed for the day, you have to jump in and do. But even more, I think during the pandemic, I was working garde manger, like the salad station, and I was opening and, washing dishes at the end of the night. And, my whole team who are sous chefs, they're all back of house cooks and managers. They were working, front of house duties some days to make tips. And it was just, it was a little bit all over the place. And I think that as hard as that was for us, it was such a eye-opening, not even eye-opening, it was just a learning experience. Like we kept learning and we kept, doing new things and which kind of takes me to where I am now is, a lot of those things in the restaurant. So I went to culinary school in 2005 and started working in restaurants 2006. So that's, 15 years ago. Yeah. And a lot of those things that I could have never imagined, those skills, not just the chopping and the, cooking techniques, but how do you write a schedule? How do you, lower your food cost? How do you, how do you make dishes on the menu so that a vegetarian or someone that has a peanut allergy or, whatever those things are, all those pivots that feel scary at the beginning, once you are able to just do it and do it over and over again, it becomes less scary. And so I think the pandemic allowed me a lot of opportunities to say, okay, now I've done delivery. Now I've done takeout. Now I've worked front of house. Now I know how a dish pit should be set up, all these things. And it just gave me the confidence to say, okay, I think I've never made the decision that eventually I want to open up my own restaurant, but now I've done all these things. And so I feel like that's the next step for me. So it gave me, a lot of kind of confidence to do the next part.
Well, that's awesome. And kudos to you, kudos to your team, and really kudos to everybody in the food service industry that has managed to survive, because I know a lot of people haven't, and it's really incredibly sad. And, I harp on this a lot, but if you go to a restaurant that's just reopened, even right now with all of the shortages that so many businesses are facing, just be patient and be kind, because it infuriates me to think that there are people who will go to a restaurant and that are rude to a server who's just trying to do their job. It absolutely fires me up. But I have a lot of friends who are chefs, and I have a lot of friends who are in the restaurant industry, and just be nice. Be nice, especially if you're going out there, if you're spending the money to go have a nice meal, just be patient, because you guys had to learn a completely new ball game, and a lot of you have evolved and made it happen, and a lot sadly have not. So that's my PSA for today. Just be nice, everybody, if you're going out to eat. But I'm glad that you mentioned your next step, because you did get out of the restaurant biz. You're doing some stuff right now on the side, but what's next for you?
Yeah, so I left in June, and I'm just doing private chefing now. It's very hard to think about opening your own restaurant while you're in a different restaurant, because it's very all consuming. Sure. When you're working in another space. So just kind of taking a moment to figure out exactly where is the best place for the restaurant. Here, I'm planning on opening in New York City, but like what neighborhood's the best and what size, and just kind of tweaking that concept a little bit, and figuring out like what restaurant do I want to run for the next 10, 15 years. And it's an exciting, it's no longer scary, but it's exciting. And, yes, there's a lot to do, but I'm looking forward to, having my hands in all those details.
That's amazing. That is absolutely amazing. And all the way over on the West Coast, I'll be pulling for you. So
Thanks.
I'll be watching for sure. I'm very, very excited for you. And then also I want to mention, you just recently, August of this year, one of your recipes landed in Food and Wine. That's dope.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's always fun. So many of the things that I never, imagined myself getting to do have all centered around the food world, whether it's traveling, getting to meet so many influential people. And also, to be part of publications like Food and Wine. It's really an honor.
Yeah.
It's cool.
And you, of course, did roasted carrots. You did something that centered around carrots. Why vegetables? What is it about vegetables? I know, you talked about sourcing local is a big deal for you, but what is it specifically about vegetables that really lights your fire?
So I think that vegetables can be an afterthought or a side note for so many people. And even the people that, say they like vegetables, a lot of, they could probably name on 3 fingers the vegetables they actually really like. And so the idea that that vegetables can be the star of a meal and can be as exciting as a protein is something that I've really tried to dig into and explore and get people excited about. And a lot of it does have to do with like the sourcing aspect. And, we're very lucky here, not only in the city, not just to have great farmers, because there are great farmers all across the country, but we have the access. And I think that's one thing that New York City has done very well. And, a lot of it because of the number of restaurants that are here, but the access and the distribution of these amazing vegetables are, it's not just for restaurants, it's also for home cooks available. I was at the Green Market today, and there's one in particular that I go to 3 or 4 times a week, the Union Square Green Market, which is kind of in the center of New York. And it's not even just like going in to be able to pick up produce. It's also those relationships. I know the people that grow the food, right, and I know the organic practices that they follow. And it's not just a label on something. It's also like it tastes better, and the diversity of vegetables. So it's not just like buying an orange carrot, but they have rainbow carrots, and they have 50 varieties of peppers, and each one is very nuanced. And is each one my favorite? No, but like learning how to work with a diversity of vegetables to keep them going is really important. And so, again, knowing the people, not just the farmer, not just like the vegetable farmers, but also a lot of the other ingredients, whether it's the fish or the meat that we buy, is so important. So that's something that, carrots, I think, are particular. Like no one really gets excited about carrots. Like you either like carrot sticks or you don't. But one way that I've learned to cook them is when you keep them whole and whole roast them in the oven. It's super easy, and you can do them at home, like at a high temperature, like 400, and they just change the taste, and they become sweet, and the texture is different. And then you can grill them. You can throw honey on them, hot honey. You can put maple. You can do a jerk seasoning. There's so many different recipes that you can make with them. But I like the idea that taking an unassuming vegetable and presenting it in a way that is super exciting for people, so that it's not pushing vegetables down people's throats. It's just really, showing them something new so they can, do it on their own.
Yeah. A little enlightenment, if you will. Yeah. Cause I agree. I think sometimes vegetables get a bad rap. So it's nice to see that you're putting them in the spotlight. And in fact, roasted carrots are on my menu this year for Thanksgiving. So
nice.
You inspired me. You inspired
Good
me. One. Well, congrats on really all of your success, but congrats on the recipe in Food and Wine. And then I'm really excited for you to think about this next chapter in your life, opening a restaurant, because I know that's ballsy. I interviewed Carrie Diamond from Cherry Bomb, and she said, she's opened I think 2 restaurants, and she was like, never do it again. So she gives a ton of props to
I used to live right where her restaurants were, and I was a regular.
Yeah, okay.
She,
All right. Good to know. She's incredible. But yeah, she gives mad props to those who get out there and open restaurants. So congrats to you. Super excited. We're going to wrap up and get to the final three, but I do want to say it's been really fun catching up with you. And I, again, all of those old, the girls and the boys from Aiken, South Carolina. It's just so nice to see all of their different levels of success right now, whether that's family or their careers. But just super, super proud of you. And I think it's just awesome to look at what you've done the last couple decades.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing it all with me. Let's get to the final three. Best advice you've ever been given.
Okay. I think I just like twofold. One is more of a saying, but it's something my mom said a lot that it never resonated when I was younger, but she always said, pick your battles. And I think that as I've grown in this industry, that is a very important thing, because you just you can't have everything be the most important, and you can't butt heads with every single person you work with. So that's really a big thing. And the other part was when I was working for Mike Anthony as a sous chef at Gramercy Tavern. He said that everything is in my control, and there's basically no one holding me back. And I think, a lot of people have been told something similar. But I think in the restaurant industry, especially, it can feel like, you're getting yelled at in one direction, or it's a very, long hours and tiring. And to have someone who is such a public figure in the cooking industry in the world, especially in New York City, tell you that you have the power to choose where you go, and you have all the tools that you need for someone to have that confidence in you is really the reason why I was able to take that next step and become a chef myself.
Nice. Well, good job, Mom. Good job, Mike, because it sounds like that's really stuck with you. That's awesome. And there's nothing like having someone that you believe in you.
Agreed.
Nothing.
And just a little note, because we didn't talk about it today, but mentoring in general, but also mentoring in a kitchen has been something that is probably the top two things on the reason why I'm a chef. And that's because he was such a great mentor to me.
Awesome. I always talk about her, but I love her so much. Sarah Moulton, I just interviewed her as well. And that's been a big thing for her entire life. Her mentor was Julia Child, and she just sort of ended up taking that on, and really mentoring and teaching home cooks. She loves the home cook. And so I think, we do see a lot of the negative side of kitchens based on reality TV shows and whatnot. And so I love the idea that working in a kitchen can be, while stressful, a very beautiful, positive place.
Agreed.
Awesome. That's awesome. I love that so much. Okay. What's your happy place?
So I've never been much of a homebody. And I, of course, I love spending time with my family and my friends, but I feel like I've always been, anxious when I have too much free time, or when I'm at home. And vice versa. I think in my career and working in restaurants, if you're only doing that too, it's the direct opposite. It's very stressful and definitely not relaxing. And I think that my happy place is where that intersection has happened. So my last restaurant, when I worked at 232 Bleecker, I was able to work with a lot of really talented folks that had become great friends as well. And so to kind of be in that place where people knew you so well, and you kind of were working towards that common thing, and it was still work, but there was a lot of very fun moments kind of mingled in. I think that's where I am the happiest, kind of when my work life mixes a little bit with, that not personal life, but that the people, the persons that, that are also friends.
Yeah. It's kind of that you stop and go, I'm getting paid for this right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No. Yeah. I've had several friends in newsrooms over the years, and they were the reasons why I stayed in the business so long, because at 3:00, we're all slamming to get a 5:00 newscast on, and we're cracking up at something ridiculously stupid. And you look around and you're like, I cannot believe I'm getting paid for this right now. So I totally get that. That's awesome. What do you crave in all things food and drink, either one? What do you crave? What's just like, it always sounds good to you?
Always Japanese food.
Always.
Yeah. And not what a lot of people kind of crave, those Japanese like ramen and dumplings and sushi. I kind of crave the outskirts of what mainstream Japanese here is. So like, I'm the person, when you see a sushi menu, I'm ordering some of like the little appetizer dishes, or I love the Japanese tea houses here in New York that serve the little rice bowls. But hands down, any kind of Japanese restaurant is what I crave. Awesome. On my days off, what I cook at home.
I love that. And then anything in the beverage world, wine, chocolate milk, tea.
I am a matcha drinker. I had to give up coffee about 4 years ago. So I guess I crave it because it's my caffeine. And I've learned to love it. But I guess if it's not matcha or water, I do like vermouth. And when I got to take a trip to Spain a few years ago with a bunch of New York professionals. And there was this one day we were driving through the countryside and they said, we're going to make a vermouth stop. And I was like, a vermouth stop? What's that? And it was like the most gorgeous countryside. It was a sunny, beautiful day. And we all stopped at this little house that was a bar, and they gave us vermouth with olives and a lemon twist and ice. And since then, that's been my drink of choice.
Fantastic. Vermouth. I don't think I've ever heard that
from
anyone. That's amazing. Well, you've been super fun.
Like grandma drink.
I don't know. I don't think my grandma never drank vermouth, but it's very different. So I'll have to try that. But it's kind of like, I mean, I'm sort of thinking like martini-ish.
It's a lot. Yes, but it's a lot lighter.
Lighter. Okay. Awesome. Well, this has been super fun. Not only catching up after the 7th grade, when we were very good pals, but again, I'm just super excited to hear your story, and I'm super excited to see what's next from you. And so, if anyone who's listening, if you want to follow her, you can follow her on Instagram. Actually, that's where I caught up with a lot of your stuff. Susie Cupps, is your name on Instagram.
Yeah, look out for what's coming next. Hopefully I'll have something for you next year.
Yay! Look out for Susie Cupps, everybody. And I'm very, very excited to see what happens next. So good luck to you. You have been fantastically fun. And I'm, again, very excited to see what's next for you. So is
Thanks.
Samson. You've been listening to Hungry for More, an Epicurean's Dilemma with me, Trish Close. You can watch this podcast and subscribe on my YouTube channel. Just search Hungry for More, an Epicurean's Dilemma. You can also listen and subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts.